Well, this feels awkward. I've recorded a few tutorials in my years of trying to do YouTube and do the whole be an artist on the internet thing, but I have not done one of these just like rant into the camera type videos before. The whole like clickbaity title with the thumbnail that clearly has no effort and it's just like a screenshot from the video. Well, I'm doing that right now. Um, I've got my bad webcam, my lighting, the books and the towel behind me, books and the blanket, I should say, in the shot, and my foam panels and the whole shebang. So this is gonna be interesting. What I want to talk about today is something that I was inspired to talk about after watching a video from Venus Theory on making art in the age of content creation. And it's something that I want to talk to fellow artists about because I think it's really, really important, and it's something that's really, really demoralizing, and I have no idea what the answer is, but it's a phenomenon that's going on, and the more I think we can all recognize it, the better things are probably going to be, but what do I know? Anyways, let me make sure I'm recording my audio. Looks like I am. So here's what I want to talk about. Art versus content and the commodification of art and the monetization of being an artist. This is nothing new. This has been around for at least the past couple hundred years. Really in the past, I don't know, going back to the Beatles, but even before the Beatles, right? But since the Beatles, right, everything has just been like a massive commodification of music in particular. And so I'm going to talk about music, but I want to talk about artists more generally and more broadly. And I also want to make what I feel like probably aren't newer points, but I want to go more in depth than just like commodification of art is bad, because I think that point has been made quite a few times and people might not even know what I mean by that, and that's totally fine. So what I want to talk about is what it means to be an artist and why it is that we do art, and why it is that social media in particular and content creation is really demoralizing and really depressing for a lot of artists. I know I've experienced the feeling of trying to do content creation because of my drive to make it as an artist. And I know how depressing and anxiety inducing it's been. And I know that there have been bits and times where I've had legitimate short-term success and how that hasn't actually made me feel any better. And I know that over the years of doing music, it's just a constant grind and it's a real struggle. And so yeah, I want to talk about it, and I want to get more artists talking about it and acknowledging it, because content creation it's a problem. I think the first and most important thing to do is to make a distinction between what art is and what content is. I'm not going to try and give hard definitions, but I think most people, particularly those who are genuinely motivated to make art and who are artists and who are seeking the art of art making, as opposed to just seeking some sort of like monetary gain or social power increase by doing art. And I'm not here to like shit on those people, but it's not who I'm talking to. If you're motivated to make art, you know what art is. You know that it's some version of some sort of authentic expression of yourself, your experience with the world, something along those lines, right? I'm not going to try and give a hardcore definition. We also know what content creation is and what content is. And content is specifically about getting as many people to watch as many minutes and hours of content that you create as possible. This is the currency of content creators, is time and attention. And again, not making any new points here, but this is what content creators do. They make things that are intended to be viewed by as many people for as long as possible, so that they can run ads on their videos, so that they can have promotions in their videos, so that they can have affiliate links in their description, so that they can have a Patreon page and monetize the information that they're putting out, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And not only that, so that they can grow their subscriber base, so that they can grow their social media following, which in turn gains them social power and a sense of status, and so that they can feel important in the world and feel as if people like respect them and think that what they have to say is interesting and important. And this is where you run into all sorts of drama where like YouTubers who have 100,000 subscribers will only debate YouTubers who have 100,000 subscribers. YouTubers with millions of followers won't interact with a YouTuber who has only 100,000 subscribers. blah, 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 blah. This is a social status, social power game on top of being a financial one. And that's what content creation is. That's what trying to make it as a famous person is and kind of always has been, which in many ways like counteracts what it is to be an artist, right? And it is the case that a lot of the world's best artists are really famous and that there's a correlation there. But to those who have the artistic drive, you'll know what I'm talking about when you say that like reaching fame isn't actually the thing, that when you feel most connected to your artistic self, fame is out of the question. It's not something that you're concerned with or that you're interested in those moments. It's not to say that you never worry about those things or never get excited at the idea of a bunch of people sharing your name and knowing who you are. Of course you do. We're all human. But the real sort of artistic drive, the interest in honestly communicating with the world and expressing yourself is something which is not about, excuse me, I have food in my mouth, is not about reaching any sort of status. So we've got content creation and we've got art. And what's on the, on the surface appeared as such an incredible move forward in technological advances in the past 20-ish years or so is just how accessible musical technology is to everyone. Now, it is not accessible to literally everyone, but to so many more people than it was, say, 50 years ago. You can have a at-home studio like I do and not be someone who's really rich, really rich, or someone who has a lot of connections. I have a MIDI keyboard, I have really good sample libraries, I have a professional DAW with all sorts of plugins which replicate all sorts of old school gear that was really, really expensive that I can get for way cheaper, and to the average ear, they can't tell the difference between the analog and the hardware, right? Or the digital and the analog, whatever. You all know what I mean, right? And so I, as someone who's interested in composing and sound design and whatever, I like with sample libraries right now, like I can, for $1,000, I can get really, really high quality samples and produce orchestral mockups that sound to the untrained ear as if it's an actual orchestra playing. Now, of course, my ear can tell the difference, as is anyone who does any sort of art. Like you can tell the difference between something which is a replica or whatever. That's not the point. Don't want to go there. Going to try not to get sidetracked. But there's so much accessibility. And I, being someone who grew up in, I don't know what to call my financial background, my family was never like tight for money. We were never like seriously stressed about whether or not we were gonna have enough food on the table, whether or not we were gonna have housing. I was able, because I was struggling with depression real bad in high school, to change high schools and go to a private school. So I grew up in not a situation where I was like super wealthy and could just have whatever I wanted whenever I wanted it, but things were very stable for me. And I work a job now where I make about like $55,000. I don't have any student debt, luckily. And, things are a little bit stressful, but it's not the end of the world. I'm sort of wherever you want to call me financially. I don't care. But I can afford to have these things. I've bought all the equipment that I use. I haven't pirated any of it. I did pirate things back in high school, learned that that's bad for the computer, learned that that's bad for the people who make the things, learned that that's bad for my own artistic and creative endeavors, bad for a bunch of reasons, right? So I grew up and started realizing like, okay, I got to buy everything that I'm going to use. So I've bought everything that I have, and I've got a webcam, I've got a nice microphone, I've got some lighting, blah, 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 whatever. I've got all this equipment, right? And so to most people looking in, they're like, oh my God, you can do so much music that 99.9% of people in the history of humanity couldn't do. Like someone like me who grew up in pretty good circumstances, didn't grow up in nearly good enough circumstances to, had I been born 75 years ago, go to music school, have the opportunity to work and record in a serious professional recording studio. None of those things would have been available to me. I would have gotten some job doing something that was like, and been fine, right? Gotten married, had kids, done the whole shebang. But now I've got the access to this, and I'm someone with the artistic drive, and I'm able to do it, and I'm able to make music. And that's exciting for a lot of people. That's great for a lot of people. The access to art and the equipment that it takes to make art is, without doubt, incredible. Like an unbelievable achievement in the history of humanity when you think about just how accessible this has become in such a quick pace. And so you couple that with the fact that the internet came along and said, oh, here's a bajillion ways, that's actually kind of just one way, but here's apparently a bajillion different ways to make it as an independent artist. You don't have to deal with the stressful stories you hear of musicians who make it, get signed by a record label, but then they own none of their music. They don't get to choose what they release or when they release it. They don't get to choose the version that gets released. They might like a certain mix better, but the studio comes in and says, no, this mix is going to play better on radio or whatever, right? You might have some lyric that they deem to be too edgy or out there or whatever. I don't know. Right. But this ability to be like an independent artist comes out and is available to people. And this also seems great. And to so many up and coming teenage, in their 20s, in their 30s, whatever age, artists in the past decade plus who've been coming up in this age, the accessibility to this is like incredible and inspiring, and has allowed for there to be this massive boost in the amount of art that's being made, the amount of music that's being made, all sorts of different forms of art, right? I talk about music just because that is what I do. And so this seems great. And then you couple the accessibility with the apparent increase in availability for, like, maybe not availability, but the increase in the likelihood and capacity to make it and to do this for a living, and to be able to have the freedom to do your art full time. And to everyone looking on, and to those of us who actually try and do this ourselves, this seems like a win-win. It seems like the perfect time to be alive. And lost my train of thought. My computer almost fell asleep. Right. This seems like the perfect place to sort of be alive. This seems like the perfect time to be alive as an artistic person. And what I want to be clear before I move on is that I'm not here to like totally shit on everything and say that things are worse than they've ever been. They're not. There's just new complications that don't really get talked about as being complications nearly enough. And that's all I'm trying to do. I'm not trying to say things are worse than they were before, because I wouldn't have had access to this before. And I might be working in the world of IT like I am today and never known that I had this passion to do music. So I'm not here to say things are worse than they've ever been. They're probably better than they've ever been. And in fact, I think it's hard to argue that they're not at the best point they've ever been. But you run into this problem, right, where every up and coming artist I know of who wants to do music for a living, who gets really into, they learn a DAW, they get really into producing, they play an instrument, they want to be a singer-songwriter, they want to be a composer, they want to be a sound designer, they want to be a producer, like a hip-hop, like beats producer, trap beats producer, they want to be a rapper, they want to be a singer, they want to, whatever, in the music space, right? And you're like, oh my God, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this. And you end up naturally going on YouTube and going on social media and consuming a bunch of tutorial content, like behind the scenes footage content, like day in the life, like equipment reviews, all that stuff, right? Like reviews of different sample libraries, so many mixing tutorials, mastering tutorials, songwriting tutorials, harmony, music theory, melody writing, singing tutorials. There's all sorts of information out there, right? And so we end up consuming a ton of this. And that's great because that's where we learn, most of us. Most of us can't afford to go to fancy schmancy music school. So we learn a ton. And not only that, but we find a community of other people who are interested in the same things that we're interested in. Also great. And we look around and see how many people are successfully doing this for a living, which is motivating for us. We're like, great, I can do this too, because anyone can do this, right? And so many people, I can look at their channel growth. So many people 2 years ago had 100 subscribers on YouTube and were making videos with shitty webcams and really bad lighting, and they didn't know how to edit their audio properly, and there was that like in the background that when you're wearing headphones, like, oh my God, did you not EQ that a little bit or something? And then like 2 years later, they've got 100,000 subscribers on YouTube and they're doing great. And life is awesome, right? Because they're doing music for a living full time now, right? And you look around and you get inspired and you're like, okay, I'm going to do this. Tomorrow I'm going to do this. And you get up tomorrow and you start to do it. And a week goes by, 2 weeks go by, and you're like, I'm not having a good time. And then you watch all this content that's like, well, you just got to stick with it. And, happiness and contentness comes from long-term commitment to repetitive, sort of boring tasks. And you're like, yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. And you know this because of your interest in music and how slow the learning process is and how demoralizing it is. and again, if I keep saying music, just replace that word with art, the artistic experience. And we all know this as artists because of the fact that we've been doing this repeatedly for years and years on end. No one had to force us, right, as artists to do this over and over and over again. We know that progress is slow. No one who does art and who really does art has any expectation after doing it for any period of time that you're going to learn anything quickly, that you're going to get good at anything quickly. The only way to get good at this is time. It is the 0.0001% of people who can pick things up really, really quickly. And we also know that some of the most gratifying things in art and in life are things which take a lot of hard work, are really painful, require a lot of second guessing, all these things. We know that. And we're like, okay, yeah, no, that makes sense. So then you wake up and you do the content creation thing, and week 1 goes by and week 2 goes by, and then maybe you get a few likes on the video, and then you gain a few subscribers, and you get that dopamine boost of like, oh my God, people are subscribing to my channel. I'm doing it. I'm doing the thing. And then a couple more weeks go by, and then maybe a couple months go by, or maybe you've quit after 3 weeks, maybe you make it 3 months, maybe you make it 6 months, maybe you're the rare person who actually does this for like 5 straight years, and then you totally burn out. Wherever it is along the line, just speaking for myself, other people I know who have tried to do this, or quite literally watching everyone on YouTube who does do this, at some point people reach a burnout with content creation in a way that is different and more demoralizing and more just sort of feeling of like catastrophe, like feels like a genuine catastrophic like thing in your life to get sick and tired of doing content creation. That's different than wanting to take a break from music or art. Because like I said, like those of us who do art, those of us who are artists, you may at some point burn out and you need a break, and your body will tell you, and you'll take your break. But at some point, whether you're expecting it to or not, you're going to listen to the song, you're going to listen to some song, you're going to like look at some painting, you're going to read some poem, you're going to do whatever it is, and you're going to have that thing, that fire come back, and you're going to be like, oh my God, this is it. This is what life's about, right? And it's going to come back. It always does, right? And that's sort of fine. And that's another thing you learn over the years. But when it comes to content creation, that anxiety and that excitement is different. And so why is that, right? And I think that fundamentally this is what it comes down to is take a drink. I think that part of what we're struggling with as artists is that there's so much opportunity to turn this into a career in a way that hasn't been previously, that those of us who are really interested in sort of doing art and have this drive will spend all this time doing it and get really into it and talk about it with other people and everyone maybe not everyone, some people I know have family pressure about like not studying STEM or whatever, but assuming you've got like a healthy, loving family or whatever, I don't want to make judgments about people's family, but assuming you live in a community or you've got your family or you've got your friends who are supportive of this and they're like, yeah, go for it, man, like, or gal, or I need to cut that. That's cringe as shit. Like, yeah, go for it. It gets really hard to explain to those people what's so demoralizing about content creation. And so anyways, I keep blowing this off because I have a hard time like putting it into words. But I think that what's going on here is that when we get really into doing art and we find the thing that drives us, right? Like we find our life's purpose or whatever, we get really connected with this sense of like authentic, honest expression. And this is what the artistic drive is that on some level, our ability to, with words or with our expressions of emotions or just with our relationships with other human beings, something about life isn't meeting that satisfaction. There's the realization that a lot of us artists have that some inauthenticity is required at all times in the human experience. If you want to live in a community of other human beings, you can't just be at all times without any awareness of like how you're being, how you're existing. If your manager says something mean to you at work, you can't just break down and start crying. I mean, maybe you can let out a few tears and that's socially acceptable, but you can't just full-blown bawl, right? Like, not acceptable. And I'm not here to say that it necessarily should be. But on some level, regardless of whether you're living in a capitalist system or however long you've been around, I am just going to throw out this, which may be false, maybe some people will disagree, but I think that like for as long as like human community has existed, the requirement to be inauthentic at times has always been there. Again, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe some people will disagree, but I think that that kind of has always been there. And regardless of whether it's always been there, it certainly is the case nowadays, right? Like the repression of the honest expression of the self, whatever that means, it's a hard thing to define, is constant. And so those of us who get this artistic drive, I think that there's this real connection with honesty and authenticity that feels like we can't get anywhere else in life. And this is obsessive. Like a genuine connection with yourself, with the world, with other human beings, with other animals, with whatever is addicting. It feels meaningful. Like it is meaningful. It creates meaning for so many people, and is why artists get really into this, is because of the authenticity of it, right? And so that's why you hear the advice. Like I'm a friend of mine, Finn, who I do the Zigzag music tutorials with, said one time when we were working on a song together, I said one of the things that I'm sure most people who have tried to write lyrics at any point in their life have said, which is, I'm just not sure I have anything new to say. And he said, well, it's not about having anything new to say. It's about having something true to say. And I was like, oh yeah, no, that seems obvious. Duh. Like that's kind of like, yeah, no shit, dude. Like that's the whole point of doing music, right? It's not necessarily to say something new. It's to say something true. And that is like music to a T. It's one of the things I remember hearing on the It's Always Sunny pod, where the cast members like recap the episodes, and the host / producer, whose name I don't remember, but she said to who the heck plays Dennis? I'm blanking on whoever plays Dennis. Whatever. We're getting off topic here. But she makes this comment. She's like, I think I've got an idea as to why girls really, really like guy songwriters, like why we have such crushes on them. And we're like, well, it's because, and she said, it's because it's the one place in society where it's socially acceptable for men to be completely emotionally vulnerable, right? And whether or not that's entirely true, who knows? But there's some truth to that, right? Where like men who are so emotionally repressed societally, we all sort of know this, it's cool to be really emotionally vulnerable and to talk about how insecure we are around women or in our romantic relationships or whatever it is in songwriting, right? Like you can do that. You can talk about how much you liked your dog or something and how sad you are that your dog passed away in a way that's like not really that cool to like go out and do that at work. And I don't know. I mean, maybe with a dog, it's fine. But like there's something about the honesty to this, which is so key and so crucial, and what gets us coming back to this over and over and over again. And then content creation comes along, and content creation is inherently inauthentic. And what I mean by that is not necessarily that all content is bad or is lazy or anything of that nature. It's that the whole point of creating content is to get views, right? The purpose is what other humans are giving back to you. It's what they're paying you, whether it be money, whether it be time, whether it be attention, whatever. That is the purpose of content. Now, it might so happen to be the case that the authentic communication of yourself, your artistic endeavors, can merge itself into content, that there can be enough overlap where you can sort of express yourself honestly. But the primary function of content is to get something back from other human beings. Whereas the primary purpose of art itself, the fundamental like thing that gets us all doing art, is the expression of ourself. It is a very personal, self-fulfilling thing. It is about an honest expression. It is about authenticity within oneself that has nothing to do with anyone else. Good art is about whether or not you are being authentic or true to yourself, whether or not it was an honest attempt at being honest, right? And so sometimes these things overlap, right? But a lot of times they don't. Where they overlap, where they don't, I'm not going to try and define that, but I think you all probably have an idea as to where this difference lies. There's some instances of real, clearly authentic art, and there's some instances of really clearly inauthentic content, right? Like someone who makes a reaction video to someone else doing something is content, right? Like, why else would I want to watch? Like, or people who make YouTube shorts about like celebrity drama. That's content, right? That's not It's not art. Someone's not trying to connect with their inner honest experience by talking about the divorce between these two Hollywood celebrities and making a 60-second short out of it to try and get your views and attention. When in reality, the people are clicking on the video not even because of you, but because of the people you're talking about. So you're like monetizing other people to get attention for yourself. It's content. It's not art. And I'm not here to shit on anyone. Like, content is what's promoted. Like, in a system, regardless of what your feelings are of the world we live in and on capitalism and your political leanings, the goal of things in today's world is to make money. Like, content is the thing that the world we live in wants. Art can be something that the world we live in wants, but it's not necessarily. When picking between the two of them, YouTube as an algorithm is always going to pick content over art because content is guaranteed to monetize, whereas art is not. Art might, but content is guaranteed to. Now, it's not to say that all content is, but the best of content is always going to be monetizable because it's made for the purpose of getting attention. Hope that distinction makes sense. And so where we run into this big problem as artists is that in so much of the world, like in the business world, for instance, right? I was thinking about this before I started recording, right? I was thinking like, okay, what if I was the person who created, let's say I was the person who created the Kindle, right? The little iPad looking thing that you read books on. In a hypothetical world that didn't exist, and I create that today. And I say, okay, great. I've got this thing. I go to investors and I say, hey, I've created this product. I want to sell it. And it's this thing which I'm like, I think it's going to make books more accessible to people, but also there's this awesome like moral thing tied to it, which is that it's going to reduce the amount of paper we consume as a society. It's going to help climate change. It's going to get people more access to books. I think it's great. And investors come in and they say, yeah, awesome product, man. Like, go for it. We're going to sell a bajillion of these. And you get to the selling point, right? And you get a marketing team involved and you're trying to sell this thing. And to anyone who's done any work in marketing, to anyone who's read research on human psychology, will know that like the act of marketing is the act of inauthenticity. It is playing on human psychology to get them to buy things, right? We realize that this is way more effective than trying to convince someone that this is something that they need, to sort of hijack their psychology to make them feel some sense of like human, something that plays on the like fundamental nature of humanity, however you want to define that, right? But like our need to fit in with community, our social status, our confidence, our feelings of being hyper masculine or hyper feminine or being attractive or being athletic or being rich or whatever. Like playing on human psychology is a way that's going to sell things, right? And so this is the whole point of marketing. And so you might come along with something like, let's say I create the Kindle, right? And it's not obviously called that because I created it, but if I create that and go into market with it, it's totally accepted in today's world, and it's totally expected that I am going to take advantage of marketing strategies to get people to buy it, which aren't really about the things that I created it for, right? When I created the thing and I went to the investors, I said, this is so great because it's going to reduce climate emissions or going to help climate change. This is great because it's going to get people more access to books and people are going to be reading more and a wider variety of things. But then we go and we start running ads for it on those two things, and maybe people aren't buying it a ton as much as we want. And you say, okay, how do you get people to buy this? Well, then you start saying, well, what if we start getting content creators who like do like who are like book channels or like productivity channels, and we start advertising with them. We start running ads that play on people's sense of being productive, of being smart, of being someone who sort of like has academic status, someone who dresses in a certain way, has a certain aesthetic to the way they are. They're really proud about the fact that they don't use too much social media and that they only post to social media to talk about like the books they read. And we make people feel really smart and feel like they're the kind of person who's interesting because they do all sorts of reading and they've got this really slick Kindle and it's got this status thing to it. And so when you see someone whip out a Kindle on the train, you're like, oh yeah, that's someone, that person's not using TikTok all day long. That's a smart person who's probably read like every classic in American literature or whatever, right? So you start playing on the human psychology of it and boom, you start selling a bunch of products, right? Because it plays on the human psychology. My AG1, which if you've ever listened to a podcast, you've probably heard a sponsor from, plays into this sense of the human psychology of like taking care of yourself to feel better so that you can be more productive, maximize your day, live longer, this, that, and the other thing. Now, is my singularly drinking AG1 really going to make a difference on any of that crap? No, but it plays into my sense that like I'm the kind of person who takes care of myself and who does things that maybe aren't very fun and eats things that don't taste very good, but they're better for my long-term health. They're better for my ability to focus and do more things like music, right? And helps me recover when I go for runs or whatever the heck. And the advertisements this is how advertising is done. We all expect it to be done this way. And if you're not doing it that way, people will look at you funny and be like, what are you doing? And if you start to have questions about it, you're like, why are we advertising this way? This is not actually why I created the product. We're like kind of playing into other parts of human psychology that weren't related to why I made this thing. Like investors would look at you like, why are you questioning that? Like, that's just how sales are done, dude. Like, chill, right? And it's just the way it is. And are there problems with that? I would argue that there are. But a lot of people would be like, no, it's fine. We're just like meeting human needs in different ways, whatever, however you want to make the argument, right? And the thing is that when it comes to like the creation of, when you're creating a commodity for something like a Kindle to be sold, the whole point of it is after it's been sold, it's sort of what it's going to do for the world. It's going to, right? Like you can justify this sort of like inauthentic marketing because of the fact that at the end, if enough people buy it, we're going to make dents in climate change. We're going to get more people reading books. And maybe we subsidize it in schools and we have school libraries all of a sudden just become stations with Kindles on them. And we don't need to print all these books. And maybe even someday we get companies that start, and this is already, of course, going on, but whatever. But you start to go down the path of like what it would look like to have all the things that we do on paper that could be done on a screen, that we could reduce paper usage, get more people reading, whatever. And so then you're thinking about all these things and you're like, yeah, okay, whatever we have to do in terms of marketing, so long as we're not like blatantly lying about what the product does, like we're not going to, so long as we don't tell people that the product is going to like make you wealthier or like blatantly lie about something like that. If we just play into some human psychology, that's not bad, because the thing that matters is getting the people to buy the Kindle, getting them to use it, right? And this is my hypothetical Kindle. And that's just how the world is, like it or not. That's the way the world is that this sort of like ends justify the means type logic applies to the selling of products and to the selling of commodities. And so then when it comes to being an artist in today's day and age of social media, we get this problem where you tell your friends and your family, you're like, I think I really want to do art. I think I really want to do this thing. I want to do it. I want the freedom. I want the independence of having the ability to choose how to spend my own time. I want to be I want to be an artist. And so you look around, what does society tell you? Like the only way to be an artist in today's world is to be a content creator. And you say, okay, great. And you tell your friends you're going to start doing content creation. They support you. And then maybe at some point along the line, you run into some of these problems. You're like, this feels a little inauthentic. I don't feel like I'm being honest when I'm selling a tutorial talking about like, did you know if you just want to be like a film composer, you just got to use the Dorian mode, right? Like, hidden secret that no one ever tells you. Like Hans Zimmer will like secrets that only Hans Zimmer knows, whatever, like this kind of shit, right? Where it's like the Dorian mode, if you just use the major six, if you use the natural six and a minor scale, it's like film music, bam, right? And there's no problem with educating people on what the Dorian mode is. Dorian's awesome. But the problem is the inauthenticity of trying to sell that to people and being like, yeah, you should follow me and listen to my music because I know what the Dorian mode is, which feels very pretentious and very inauthentic. And so people run into this problem where they're trying to create tutorials because they don't know how else to create content creation, where they're trying to sell things that they know they really shouldn't be trying to sell because it's not something that they own. Musical information and information regarding music theory is something which is not owned by anyone. And this is where, like, those of us in the music community, like seeing Ed Sheeran get freaking sued for using a chord progression, like those of us were like, we were enraged by it because we're like, no one owns a chord progression, but people have Patreon pages where they're telling people these are the 10 most used chord progressions, right? And so it just feels inauthentic. Like you're selling shit that you shouldn't be selling. But there's no other way to do it. This is the only way to make it as an artist. It feels inauthentic. You start telling other people that you're running into this problem, and they look at you funny. They're like, well, if you want to make it financially in today's world, this is how you do it. You read a marketing book and you create a thumbnail and you clickbait title and you to create a tutorial, which the full thing, you edit the full thing, you upload the first quarter of it, and the final 3/4 of it go to your Patreon page, and then you run an ad on the video for some sort of like hook theory or something related to music theory, and then you have affiliate links to Amazon where people can buy the equipment that you're using, and you got to down the list you go. And you talk about this EQing trick that there's probably like 10,000 videos on YouTube, maybe more, talking about X EQing tip, and that yet you're still trying to commodify it because you're creating content. You're not creating art when you do that. And so regardless of whether or not you're directly selling it, you could be uploading it completely free. If the purpose of what you're creating is content, it's going to feel inauthentic. And thus, you're going to still feel like, on some level, you're going to feel like you're ripping people off or that you're not being honest. Even if you're not trying to directly monetize anything, just the nature of making content which tells people about, you sort of sidechain your bass to your kick drum or whatever, right? Like you make that video and you go, ugh, like something feels wrong about that. Like I remember watching a video where I learned that at some point, and it was super important because, yeah, you got to sidechain your bass to your kick drum. But when I make it, I feel like a liar. Like what, what the heck is going on? And so you start talking to people about it, and they're like, no, dude, like that's just like, you're just trying to like turn yourself into a business, man. It's business. Art is business. And so what appeared in the beginning as like this awesome situation to find yourself in, where like being an artist and being a content creator are things that go in parallel, and this like beautiful situation to be born in, where the more you do one, the more you're doing the other, and you just move up the line, right? And they go together and they converge, and you get your social status, you get your money, you get your freedom to make art, you get your freedom to do whatever the heck you want, to be an artist, to be authentic, to be someone who has something interesting to say, and to not feel guilty about it because you're being honest. You are an artist who has something honest to say. And so regardless of whether or not it's true, it's true for you, right? Like you're being honest about your own experience of the world, your own views, whatever. And so like, yeah, that's a great world to be in. I don't have a problem with having a large following so long as I feel like I'm being honest. And then you realize that content creation is inherently about being dishonest. And that doesn't necessarily mean full-blown lying. It doesn't mean you sit up there and tell people that Lydian mode is something that it's not. That's not what I mean. Like you don't lie and be like, everyone's been telling you that Lydian mode is about sharpening your fourth, and actually it's about flattening your whatever. Like you don't lie to people in that sense, but it's dishonest in the sense of you're doing it to do art. Like the whole purpose of the content creation for up-and-coming artists, the underlying motivation for it is so that we can do art. That is its reason. And the whole reason behind doing art is to be authentic and to be honest. And so when you're doing something for the purpose of being honest and being authentic, but that thing, the content creation, requires a level of inauthenticity, then something feels wrong. Something feels very icky inside. And the whole purpose of doing art is lost. And so you run into this problem, which is way worse than just one of having to balance time between doing your own art and making content. The problem is not balancing your time between the two. If both of them felt like they were moving you in the direction of being a better and more honest and more authentic and more interesting artist, we wouldn't have this problem. But you see people try and start tutorial channels, they stop a few weeks later. Done this a bajillion times, right? You see people who have tutorial channels, who have music theory channels, who have whatever channels, who do it for some number of period of time, they burn out. And this isn't true just for art, like for artistic specific, like people trying to use YouTube as like a way, as a means towards becoming an artist. This is true for people whose like whole passion in life is content creation itself, like making videos. You'll see massive burnout for people who are like video game streamers or video game not tutorials, but like walkthrough whatever's, and class setups and this kind of thing, where it's like people burn out and run into this like just feeling of self like disgust in a way, because it feels wrong and it feels dishonest. And so the thing I'm doing, like earlier today, I uploaded a video talking about how I made the first track on the album I just released, and like the whole reason I made it is not because I want to teach people, honestly. It's because I want people to go and listen to the album. And I've got like no monthly listeners on my new Spotify that I just created. And my YouTube channel is very tiny. It's like sub 15 subscribers. So I don't have anyone listening to it. It's a genre of music which is very much not popular. And I'm like, well, how do I have any chance of getting anyone to listen unless I make content about it? And if I can get that content to be popular enough, then maybe people will go actually listen to my art. But that feels disingenuous. It feels wrong. It doesn't feel honest. It feels like it's like missing the entire point of what art is. And so at the end of the day, I, like every other artist, am faced with this dilemma. Do I spend my time doing art, or do I spend my time like reviewing sample libraries and reacting to new music that just came out, which I didn't make, but I'm giving a reaction? And is my passion in life to be Fantano and to be a music critic and to be an honest music critic and someone who cares about like the music industry and the state of music and who cares about like increasing the quality of music through review and who has a love for music and wants to express that? Like, no, that's not my passion in life. That clearly is his. But if I try to do what Fantano does, it's content. Whereas for him, I think, I don't want to speak for anyone else, but like there's a way to do everything that can be art. Not everything, but there's a way to do a lot of things that can be an honest expression, or at least the lines are a lot blurrier. For me, like my artistic expression comes through the making of music itself or playing an instrument or something, but that's not nearly as directly and repeatedly monetizable as the way of making YouTube shorts about this EQing tip will save your mix, reviewing to the top 10 albums of the past year, comparing 20 different string sample libraries or whatever, right? And so we run into this problem where people are just making the same crap and re-uploading it, and it feels wrong. It's missing the entire point of what being an artist is. And it's impossible in today's day and age to make it as an artist. I say impossible. It's borderline impossible to make it as an artist without doing content. And content it's about making money. And that's not why we do art. And yet at the same time, as someone who's not satisfied with my job, who struggles to find meaning in life, I want to turn art into a living so that I can spend as much time as I choose to doing the thing that actually gives me meaning. And so I and so many other people run into this problem where no matter how much we want to say, fuck this, like, fuck this, I don't want to sit here and give do another tutorial on the importance of like some tip that everyone knows. I feel disgusting trying to turn music theory into content. Music theory is something which is so cool and so interesting, and it is the pathway. It is one of the pathways towards, in music, artistic, honest expression. Interesting harmony, theory. It unlocks the ability to express yourself in ways that you didn't know you had, and that is awesome and incredible and should be promoted. And anyone who wants to learn music theory because they are an artist should have access to learn it. And that is super important. And so having educational videos is awesome, but making them for the sake of content, it feels gross. And I think all of us on some level feel it. It feels wrong. This pathway towards making it as an artist in today's world, where the way to do it is to start tiny, you get skilled enough where your music is good enough that people are going to listen to it. Then you make tutorials or the type of content that is super revealing. It reveals things. It goes in depth in a way that lots of people who've made it don't have to do. They can make a 10-minute recap video that's going to get a bajillion views, but actually isn't that honest. It's not to say that's not honest. It's just not that helpful. And I might make a 30-minute video that goes more in depth. I show the MIDI roll of each different instance. I show how I EQ'd this. I show all these tiny little things that you miss. And then over time, I gain some subscribers, and I start to be able to monetize my videos. I start to be able to run affiliate links. I start to open my Patreon. I start to see the money coming in. And I say, hey, I'm putting in all this work. I need to start monetizing this. That's the whole purpose of it, right? Is to monetize it so I can do art for a living. So what do? I start reducing the quality of my content. That doesn't mean that my cameras get worse or that my audio quality gets worse. Those things get better. What I mean by reducing the quality is that the educational content goes down. I start making less and less and less of the educational content free and start charging more of it. And you see Patreon pages and courses, you see online courses that are teaching you like what the top 10 most common chord progressions in pop music history are when you could Google that for free. It's gross. And I'm not here to, and I want to be very clear, like I'm not here to shit on anyone individually or collectively. Like I don't think this is any individual's fault. This is not any artistic person's fault. We are all in this trap. It's just important to recognize it as a trap, right? I didn't get into music to make music courses. My calling, I don't think it was to be a online music teacher. If someone I know in real life comes up to me and asks me for a mixing tip, I will gladly talk about it with them for a long period of time. I'm very interested in talking about these things and connecting with fellow musicians and learning from them. That feels authentic. But making it for the purpose of, if someone came to me and I knew them in real life. Let's say I had a friend at work who was just getting into producing, and they're saying, "Hey, can you show me some of the basics of EQing? I haven't used an EQ before, and I want to understand like kind of how it works." I would be like, "Oh my God, yes, please! Like, let's sit down and do it." But what I wouldn't do would be like, "Yeah, just subscribe and like my last YouTube video, man, and then I'll teach you how to EQ," because that feels gross. Even though I'm not charging them money, that's weird, right? I would be like, "What?" I'd be like, "Oh, okay, never mind. I'll find someone else." But that's what we're doing online. And it feels normal because that's what everyone's doing, is like finding some cheesy and interesting new way to be like, "Hey, subscribe and like the video." Like, I don't know. It's just a rant that I needed to go on, and maybe no one will ever watch this. But it's tough. And I don't have any answers. I don't think that there are any answers. I think that the only thing that matters is that more artistic people do more art. And you're recognizing that we're going to feel some level of guilt about content creation maybe will free us up to do the content creation so that we can actually do the art. And it sucks. It really sucks that just doing art isn't an option, because there are so few places in life where authenticity is allowed. And this is one of them. And it feels like it's being stolen. That sucks. But maybe, the next time, maybe it'll be more commonplace in the future when someone's making like a top 10 common chord progressions of all time video, to start off the video with being like, "Hey, I don't own this. You can Google this for free. You don't need, I'm asking you to subscribe and like my video because I want to do art for a living. I want to do music for a living. I don't think that what I'm telling you is actually worthy of selling anyone. That's wrong, but I don't know how else to, this is the only way to do it." And so if this is the place that you learn about these 10 chord progressions, that's fantastic. But please don't interpret this as me trying to be honest or do art. Like, this isn't my art. This is just what I have to do in today's world to do art. So yeah, I think that's about all I have to say. I'll end it there.